This is a session that I'm particularly excited about and that I think if you are interested in large language models, you will be too. I'm joined by Thorsten from Databricks, and he's going to show us how to make your very own super mega awesome large language model right from your laptop.
Exactly. Thanks for having me. My name is Thorsten Jacobs. I'm a senior solutions architect at Databricks, and as mentioned, I want to talk about large language models. And I think they have been quite popular recently because of one particular large language model, namely ChatGPT. But what I want to show is that you don't have to use this big proprietary models, but you can basically also train and own your own model. And then we recently at Databricks released one called Dolly, and I want to talk a little bit about Dolly and basically how to train LLMs in Databricks. But first, let me start, for those of you who don't know who Databricks is. Basically, the founders of Spark founded Databricks about 10 years ago now. The Lakehouse company, I'm going to talk about that in a moment, and we heavily believe in open source, so all the tools that are inside Databricks, Delta, MLflow, etc., all open source as well. And I mentioned the Lakehouse. So basically, what we mean with Lakehouse is that you use one unified platform for all use cases, from warehousing, data engineering, to ML and streaming, and on all types of data, be it structured, semi-structured, etc. So basically having all in one package here. And why is this important for large language models? Because they depend on large amounts of high quality data and on text data, which is like unstructured or semi-structured data. And this can be then hosted inside Databricks, and you can work with this type of data and build the model there. So first, what is a large language model? A bit of a recap. Basically, there are different ways of like how they are operating. You can use them, for example, for translating, for summarizing, etc. And what makes them so interesting is that you can train them on text, and there's just so much. I mean, we are working with text so much, right? So there's so much information out there that you can use to train them. But also they accept instructions in terms of natural language, and that's like the easiest way for us, of course, to communicate. And they have been around for quite a while, but why suddenly is there this large interest? Because recently there was a kind of a breakthrough has been shown with ChatGPT how powerful they actually are. And now there are quite a few of different types of large language models out there that you can basically use. And I want to show, basically, for those of you who haven't heard of Hugging Face is the hub in the internet where these models that are trained or that you can use by yourself are being hosted. Basically a hub for different machine learning models, but also for data sets. And then the idea is that, okay, if you want to own your own large language model, what you could do is you take one of these open source models, but then train it on your specific data so that the model understands your domain. And then you own this model yourself and use it for different use cases. And we have this integration like in Databricks because we work with open source tools. You can use Python, etc. You have quite a scalable compute, can basically do this in Databricks. How do we see customers using it, or what are potential use cases? Starting from basically democratizing access to data. Not everyone knows how to program, how to write SQL or other commands. So using these LLMs, you can basically have a natural language interface to your data and then interact with the data in that way. It can give you insights about like unstructured data, like text data, which you maybe do not have saved in tables and you cannot run queries on it. But with the help of these models, you can basically extract information from them. And it can do some tasks that maybe are a bit boring and repetitive, like writing specific text formats, etc., and then summarizing for you. And then we recently introduced Dolly. So what is Dolly? Dolly is basically the first open source instruction following LLM, which is licensed for commercial use. And the last part there is interesting because there are a lot of open source models out there that you can use yourself, but you can only do it for research or for your own purpose. And in this case, basically, you can use it commercially if you want to, and we put it on Hugging Face for everyone to use. And that means that, like with Dolly, every organization can now customize their own LLM, and then basically also control where the data goes. So you don't have to send your data to an external provider, and basically you know where the model is and where your data is here.
What is the difference between something that's fine-tuned on something and something that is just trained in general?
Yeah, I can actually come to this here. So talking about fine-tuning and training, what Dolly is basically, it's based on an open source, like 12 billion parameter model from the Pythia family. And that model can do certain tasks because it understands language. It was trained on language, but it can't do like things like summarization, instruction following in the same way how we would like to use it in this case. So what we then did is that we needed a question and answer data set that gives us different scenarios of how we might want to use this model. And this data set, we created at Databricks internally. Basically, it's a crowdsourced effort that all the employees helped building it. So it's a high-quality human-made model. And for this, on the existing model, we then fine-tuned it to make it, give it the capabilities that we wanted it to have. And yeah, this model is quite a bit smaller than a lot of the commercially available models nowadays, and that makes it a bit easier to basically own and train by yourself. Yeah, that was the intro, and I think the easiest always to understand how things work is with a demo. And I just wanted to start with just the basics of how do I just use the model as is. And here we have the Hugging Face page of the model. And if we go down a bit, we get some instructions of how we then get started with this model. And this is what I did here. Let me zoom in a bit. Basically, just a few commands to install, download, just one node. It's like close to 24 gigabytes, so it's a bit that needs to be downloaded.
So you're just using transformers straight from Hugging Face?
Exactly. So I use the pre-trained model as is, exactly using this transformers integration, and then yeah, with a few lines of code, I can start and send commands and questions to my model here. And here's just some examples, like explain difference between fission and fusion. I can ask it about the lakehouse. It knows that even. It knows about Stockholm. So it like can already do quite some interesting stuff. But now maybe I don't want to ask questions about Stockholm or something. I want to have something that is specific to my business. But Dolly probably doesn't know about if you have a very niche business. So how do I go ahead and do that? I mean, say we have like the scenario that yeah, we want to build some sort of chat bot for my customers, and they can ask questions. For example, in this case, a gardening shop. And then Dolly should answer these questions. So one way would be to retrain it completely, and then you have to build up this new question and answer data set. But an easier way, and so you slip retraining, would be the following. You take a data set that contains this knowledge. It could be from some internal knowledge base. It could be from like customer support cases that you had from earlier. And then you take this text data set, load it into Databricks, and then create something called a word embeddings, or basically you vectorize, you make numbers out of your texts. And what that is for is basically, it's a quite common method in natural language processing. It can then find text or information that is similar to each other with these vectors. And then what we do is we save this vectorized information in a specific database that is made for this. It's called a Chroma database. And then in the next step, now a user asks my blueberries question. And then I go ahead and also vectorize this one. I compare it with my data set from earlier, and then I find like similar context from my data set. And this context, together with the question, I feed into Dolly, And Dolly then takes this mess, which might be quite a large text or something, and extracts the valuable information from it and basically provides me the answer. And through this step, I can also trust the data better because many of these LLMs are not perfect in, like if I train them, fine-tune them on these kind of data sets, I think this fact, like memory is often not perfect. So this way you can trust this more. And then in the next step, maybe now I want to have a follow-up question to this. So how do I do this? This is basically then the whole picture. Like you have the data prep and the inference. And then for the follow-up questions, what I do is I feed the new question with the same embeddings. Again, I pick the information from my database to Dolly. But this time, I also add the previous context to it, like the previous question, previous answer. And from all this chain of context, it will then understand that this is a follow-up question and can be like instruction following. And this is basically the same concept that it's also used by like ChatGPT to have a conversation. And I can quickly, like if you want to try this out at home, if you have Databricks, that is, we have this cool website called Databricks Demos, dbdemos.ai, where we have a lot of like easily available pre-made demos available. So you can simply install it in an existing workspace. And then for different content, we have demos available. And then here we have the Dolly one. So you would simply say, pip install db demos and then import this specific one, and then it installs you all the notebooks as a cluster that is ready to use in your workspace. Just one note here: the cluster needs a GPU, so that is something that should be available in your cloud region.
How big GPU do you need?
It wasn't too big. I think with a single GPU it works, but sometimes runs out of memory. But then another cluster had like 4 GPUs, and it was.
And that was okay.
Yes, it depends on it. But the standard is not too big of a machine needed here.
Okay.
And and then this is what it looks like. And I can't, go through all the details, but and just also a bit of a recap for those who don't know Databricks at all. So this is basically the Databricks workspace. This is the starting point. You have notebooks where you can write your code, Python, Scala, SQL, R. Here on the side, you have access to your data sets, to your compute. And for specific users, like for machine learning, for example, we have then some special features like model registry, feature store, experiment tracking, etc. And the nice thing with notebooks is that you can also include text and pictures, so it makes it a bit easier to follow. And then basically this is exactly what I said. So this is already the step where we go ahead and have this database built up and send a question to it. And if I quickly go down, we can see then here how we have asked this question to it. And then here it gives us some information. I don't know much about blueberries, but it sounds about right. And here it can also give you, about gardening, but here it can also give you then in addition, so that you trust this answer more, the actual sources from this embedded data set as an addition to read through if you want to have more details. And then you can also ask some other questions here about aloe vera plants, and also here we get a nice
what
answer.
feature is it that provides this nice formatting in the source?
So this is basically, just to make it more readable, we embedded some HTML. We have to look at the function. Here's the function.
Oh, that's nice.
We embed HTML code inside the answer here, but in a real scenario, this would be then maybe basically the model would be hosted as an API or something, and then you would call that one.
And because it's notebooks, it's nice and clickable. That's cool.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a question on one of the slides before, or maybe it was here. It gave an example of saying, and how would you say that in Italian or something like that?
Yeah.
What languages does Dolly support?
So at the moment, it's basically based on an English base model, so it understands English. So that's also going to be the main use case. If you really want it in a different language, one would have to basically retrain the base model, or one could do something similar for translation, but I wouldn't really use Dolly for if you want to do translation kind of things or so.
But does it know, has it been trained on any data from other languages? Like
No,
Wikipedia or something?
This is purely on English.
Purely English,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
good to know.
Yeah. And and then just quickly, then this is basically the next step where we then want to ask the follow-up questions, and also, a lot of different steps of code that I'm not going to go into details. But basically here we then see the first question and answer, and then we follow up with how much water should I give, so it understands I'm actually talking about my blueberries here, and adds a follow-up question. So just very quickly, that's like a rough how you could use it.
Oh wow! Can you talk about this? That's nice too, I think. The fact that it's not just a development environment, you can actually deploy it.
Exactly, and I could literally say it. I was about to come to it in the next steps, basically the options of how all this ML is embedded in Databricks. So if I go back to my slide here, just quickly here. So basically, we think large language models are not on hype. They're really going to change a lot going forward in how AI works. We released our version, but there are other open source ones available, and we really think this is a way forward. We built Dolly not only as a product to use as is, but mainly also to show, okay, you don't need like a proprietary model. You can actually build and host your own ones, and with then also owning the data yourself and owning the model yourself, and then and we also believe that the world will really shift towards more of these open source type of large language models because they have a number of advantages when it comes to how you can customize, as mentioned, data ownership, etc. And then talking about the point that you came from, so we already have, and there will be more features coming now in Databricks where we have native support for large language models, where with our ML flow, this is the tool for basically the ML ops inside Databricks. There will be more features towards large language models. Just keep an eye open. Like in the next weeks or months, there will be quite some new.
Could be days or weeks or months.
Yeah, mainly towards our summit, which is in summer, and we also, in addition to that, also going to import or embed it internally, basically. So we're going to have features where in our docs you can ask a large language model about Databricks instead of searching through the docs. And another nice thing will also be that we're going to embed it, for example, in SQL context, so that SQL users who usually don't have access to unstructured data can embed textual, word, questions inside their code, and then send it to, in this scenario, an API to ChatGPT, or use their own model here. And so finally, just some remarks. We have quite some information out there. Also, this is about basically the newest ML flow, what you mentioned, where we have more support for these LLM features. Check out the demo, dbdemos.ai, if you want to try it out yourself, or check on Hugging Face about this model. Yes, and also fine-tuning inside Databricks. So basically, we support the whole chain there from training, building a data set, training a model, hosting a model, fine-tuning, etc.
That's pretty exciting.
That was about what I wanted to present.
That's all we have time for, but there's so much more to go through. So I recommend everybody here get in touch with you. And what's the best way to reach you?
The best way would be via the local Databricks team. If you have, depending on where you're located, you might have already access to it, or just send out a request. Look at our website and send out a request to the official context there.
All right. Well, it looks like the threshold to getting started with the LLMs is very low on Databricks. So hopefully you guys try it out. I guess I'll be trying it out in the coming days. So thanks for showing this, and see everybody in the ether.
Thanks for having me.